Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring a set of source notes that, honestly, they fundamentally challenge how we think about mastering complex skills.
They really do, yeah. It's a fascinating perspective.
Right, because our source material today comes from a highly specialized trading consultant.
hmm
And this is an individual who works directly in the trenches with a...
It's a fascinating perspective.
Right, because our source material today comes from a highly specialized trading consultant.
hmm
And this is an individual who works directly in the trenches with a really wide spectrum of market participants.
Exactly. We're talking about proprietary traders who are trading a firm's capital, bank traders managing institutional risk, and, retail traders operating right from their home offices.
Their vantage point, the consultant's vantage point, is what makes this material so compelling.
Oh, absolutely. Because they consult across that entire spectrum, right? From the excited trainee who just funded their very first account all the way up to the hardened, consistently profitable professional.
They see everything.
Right. They see it all. And they've identified this definitive pattern. And the thing is, they aren't analyzing the financial markets or looking at who makes the highest returns.
No, they're looking at the psychology.
Exactly. They are mapping the underlying psychological evolution of the individual attempting to conquer those markets.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core mission of our deep dive today is to really understand a very specific, profound identity shift that's outlined in these notes.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah, the consultant basically argues that most people who attempt to learn how to trade, well, they never actually become traders.
Yeah, which sounds kind of harsh, but it's true.
It is. I mean, they might engage in the activity, they might even make money for a little while, but they get permanently trapped in the mechanics.
Right, they get stuck.
And the framework we're examining today breaks this evolution down into three distinct stages. First, learning to trade, then becoming a trader,
Yeah.
and finally, being a trader.
And what's fascinating here is that while the context is financial, right, this isn't actually a framework about money.
No, not at all.
If you approach these notes looking for a mechanical formula on when to buy or sell an asset, you will entirely miss the point.
You'll be looking in the wrong place.
Exactly. This is a deeply accurate psychological mapping of competence. It charts the transition from conscious, grueling cognitive effort to unconscious, internalized mastery.
The financial markets just happen to be the specific arena where this consultant has documented this psychological crucible taking place.
Right. It could really apply to anything.
Exactly. So I want you, the listener, to think about a skill you've tried to master in your own life.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it.
Perhaps you've dedicated years to learning, say, a complex programming language, or understanding the nuances of a foreign language, or even pursuing a highly technical physical discipline like martial arts.
Or learning to play an instrument.
Right, playing an instrument. As we navigate this framework, just listen for the parallels. Because the traps, the illusions of early success, and the brutal reality checks this consultant outlines in the trading world, they apply universally to the journey from an unformed beginner to a true expert.
They really do. It represents the universal architecture of skill acquisition. And the text structures this architecture into three sequential phases, like you mentioned. Each phase features its own psychological makeup, specific behavioral traps, and, importantly, strict requirements for progressing to the next level.
And you can't skip ahead.
No, you really can't. The consultant makes a crucial preliminary note about that. Transitioning through these phases is a time-bound process. It cannot be bypassed or rushed through sheer willpower.
You can't just hack your way to mastery.
Exactly. There are no shortcuts.
So we begin at stage one, which the text simply titles Learning to Trade. This is the starting line.
The very beginning.
Right. And the consultant defines this initial phase as being heavily characterized by the acquisition of basic skills, baseline knowledge, and foundational understanding.
Just learning the ropes.
Exactly. The activities involve spending time on simulators, engaging in paper trading without real capital, and eventually graduating to creating very small sizes in live markets.
Right, dipping a toe in.
The primary objective here is trying to develop what the text calls key actions and disciplines.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive load, this first stage requires massive amounts of conscious execution.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It really is. The text notes that it feels impossible at first.
It does. The cognitive load is absolute maximum. You aren't just driving. You are aggressively managing a dozen separate mechanical tasks simultaneously.
Yeah, that driving analogy perfectly isolates the phenomenon because during that initial learning phase, you have no excess mental capacity left to anticipate traffic patterns or, like, plan a route.
You just try not to stall the car.
Exactly. You are entirely consumed by the mechanics of the machine, and in the markets, the beginner is entirely consumed by the mechanics of the trade.
Right.
And the consultant highlights a very specific vulnerability that arises during this phase. They note that the beginner relies almost exclusively on what they call directed knowledge.
Okay, yes. The notes give this specific example of a beginner trading a strategy they learned from a weekend course or maybe a textbook.
Right, a guru's system.
Yeah, they're following a prepackaged set of rules.
And that reliance on directed knowledge is the defining characteristic and the defining vulnerability of the first stage.
Why is it a vulnerability?
Well, because the knowledge doesn't belong to the individual yet. They are relying on an external authority, a course, a mentor, a prescribed methodology to dictate their actions.
They're just following instructions.
Right. They haven't built their own operational framework, so they borrow one. They're essentially executing someone else's map of the territory.
I want to explore why we are so drawn to that directed knowledge in the beginning.
Sure.
Because it seems to stem from a deep psychological discomfort with ambiguity. I mean, when you enter an unstructured environment like the financial markets where literally anything can happen at any moment, the human brain panics.
It hates chaos.
Exactly. We desperately want a set of rules to impose order on that chaos. So if a guru says, whenever line A crosses line B, you buy, we cling to that rule because it relieves the anxiety of not knowing what to do.
Yeah, that anxiety reduction is precisely why directed knowledge is so appealing, but it comes at a significant cost.
What's the cost?
Well, the beginner learns the what and the how, but they lack a deep understanding of the why.
Right.
They might know how to execute the strategy, but they don't understand the underlying market mechanics. They don't get the order flow, the liquidity dynamics, or the macroeconomic drivers that actually make the strategy effective in the first place.
So it's very surface level.
Extremely. Therefore, their competence is incredibly fragile. The moment the market environment slightly shifts and the rule stops working, the beginner has no fundamental understanding to fall back on.
They're just lost.
Right. They cannot troubleshoot the problem at all.
Which sets up one of the most dangerous psychological traps outlined in this first section.
Oh yeah, the overconfidence trap.
Yes. The consultant warns that individuals in this phase are often naive about the challenge and difficulty of achieving trading success. But it gets worse. The text explicitly states they are prone to overconfidence from early successes in the market.
And the financial markets provide a uniquely deceptive environment for skill acquisition.
How so?
Well, consider a structured discipline like chess. If you sit down at a chessboard for the very first time and play against a grandmaster, you will not accidentally win.
No, absolutely not. You'd be crushed in 3 moves.
Right. The feedback loop is immediate, deterministic, and brutally honest about your lack of skill. You cannot luck your way into a brilliant checkmate.
But the market isn't deterministic. It contains a massive element of randomness, especially over a short time horizon.
Exactly.
I mean, you could literally press a button by mistake, buy a highly volatile asset, and due to an unpredictable news event, that asset appreciates 20% in an hour.
It happens all the time.
You made a substantial profit through sheer incompetence.
And this raises an important question about how the human brain interprets success.
Because it feels like you did something right.
Exactly. Our neurological reward system, specifically the dopamine pathways, is designed to reinforce actions that lead to positive outcomes.
Right.
So when a beginner applies their borrowed, directed knowledge and happens to experience 3 winning trades in a row, the brain just floods with dopamine.
It feels like mastery.
It does. The brain doesn't care that the overall market conditions simply happen to align favorably with the strategy at that exact moment. The brain interprets the positive financial outcome as direct evidence of mastery.
So they conflate their conscious execution of borrowed rules with actual expertise. They think they've solved the puzzle.
They build a completely false identity. They begin to view themselves as a trader, when in reality they are just a beginner who experienced a favorable sequence of variance while practicing basic mechanical skills.
Wow.
And because they lack that deeper understanding, they are completely naive to the impending reality check.
The reality check being when the market changes.
Right. They don't realize that their borrowed strategy only works in a specific market regime, perhaps a low volatility bull market, and they are utterly unprepared for the psychological endurance that will be required when the market inevitably transitions into a different regime.
Before we move on to what happens when that regime actually changes, I want to challenge a specific grouping in the consultant's notes.
Okay, go for it.
Because in outlining the activities of stage 1, the text lists
Builds mechanical competence. It allows the individual to practice navigating the software, executing the directed knowledge, interpreting data without any financial consequence. But the overarching point of the consultant's framework is psychological evolution. A simulator cannot replicate the evolutionary survival mechanisms that trigger when real resources are at stake.
So it's really about the biological reaction to loss.
Yes. Consider the concept of loss aversion. It's a very well-documented cognitive bias. Humans experience the psychological pain of losing something much more intensely than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value.
Right. Losing $100 hurts way more than finding $100 feels good.
Exactly. So when you are paper trading, the logical part of your brain knows there is no actual threat. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, it just remains dormant.
You're totally relaxed.
But the moment you transition to trading small sizes in a live market, even if the financial amount is objectively insignificant to your net worth.
It's risking $10.
Right, even $10, a completely different neurological pathway activates.
Your brain perceives the financial loss as a genuine threat to survival.
Yes. The stakes introduce physiological stress. Cortisol and adrenaline enter the bloodstream. The beginner might experience a narrowing of vision, an elevated heart rate, and a sudden inability to execute the very rules they followed flawlessly on the simulator.
So that's why it's a different beast entirely.
Exactly. The consultant places trading small live sizes in stage 1 because this is the first time the individual is introduced to their own physiological response to risk. They are still learning the basics, but now they're learning how their psychology degrades under the pressure of real stakes.
And that degradation under pressure, that's the catalyst for the next phase.
It is.
Because eventually, the favorable variance runs out. The market environment shifts. The directed knowledge, the borrowed set of rules we talked about, stops generating random successes and starts generating consistent losses.
The illusion of mastery just shatters.
It totally shatters. And this brings us to the threshold of stage 2, which the text titles Becoming a Trader.
This is the crucible.
Yes. According to the notes, this is the crucible where the actual transformation begins. The consultant states that in this phase, the individual is beginning to personalize their trading strategy and style.
Right.
There's a continual development of skills, but the focus shifts heavily toward developing true trading competence.
And notice the critical shift in the language used here. The text explicitly notes that during this second phase, some skills become more subconscious through repetition and practice.
Right, it's becoming second nature.
Yes. We are moving away from the exhausting conscious execution of stage 1. Because the individual has spent countless hours interpreting charts, analyzing data, managing the software, those mechanical actions no longer require intense prefrontal cortex engagement.
They don't have to think about it as much.
Exactly. They are being offloaded to the basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain responsible for habit formation and automatic behaviors.
It's the moment when the driver no longer has to look at the gear shift. Their hand just knows where third gear is.
That's right. And that cognitive offloading is mandatory because the individual suddenly needs all of their conscious processing power for a much more daunting task.
Which is?
Survival. The text highlights that stage 2 is characterized by encountering periods of drawdown and losses that have tested their commitment, self-belief, and resilience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a drawdown is the harsh mathematical reality of the markets. It represents the peak-to-trough decline of an account's equity.
It's painful.
Very. It's a losing streak, but it's more than just a temporary setback. It is a sustained period where your capital is just continuously decreasing.
Right.
And the mathematics of a drawdown are brutal. I mean, if you lose 50% of your capital, you don't need a 50% gain to get back to even. You need a 100% gain just to recover to where you started.
The math works against you.
It really does. But I want to focus on the specific psychological traits the consultant lists here, because they say the drawdown tests commitment, self-belief, and resilience. Why does a financial loss attack those 3 specific psychological pillars?
Well, it's because the drawdown dismantles that false identity constructed during stage 1.
The overconfidence.
Exactly. The individual previously felt confident and competent. Now the market is systemically proving them wrong day after day. The drawdown feels intensely personal, and it systematically attacks those three pillars.
Okay, let's break them down. First, commitment.
Right, commitment. The individual has to confront the sheer difficulty of the endeavor. They have to ask themselves if they possess the genuine drive to master this discipline, or if they were only interested when the positive reinforcement was flowing.
Because it's easy to be committed when the market is handing you dopamine hits every day.
Oh, anyone can be committed during a winning streak. Second is self-belief, and this is perhaps the most devastating casualty of a severe drawdown.
Because you start doubting yourself.
Deeply. The individual begins to question their own cognitive abilities. They wonder if they are fundamentally flawed, if they lack the analytical intelligence or the emotional control required to succeed.
So the external failure of the market is internalized as a personal defect.
Exactly. And third, resilience. The capacity to absorb that psychological damage, objectively analyze the failure without descending into fatalism, and basically return to the market to try again.
And here is where the framework introduces a fascinating paradox. Because the consultant notes that it is precisely during this painful period of drawdowns that the individual is developing awareness of importance of psychology and performance in trading.
The timing is incredible.
It is. You only begin to comprehend the paramount importance of psychological control after your own psychology has completely failed you.
Yes, because in stage one, the individual viewed trading as an external problem to be solved.
Right, they thought it was about finding the right indicator.
They thought the challenge was deciphering the market's secret code. But in stage two, the drawdown forces an internal reckoning. They realize that their biggest obstacle isn't the complexity of the market. It is their own cognitive biases. It is their tendency to hold on to losing positions out of hope, or their tendency to exit winning positions prematurely out of fear. They realize that trading is fundamentally a discipline of psychological self-management.
Let's explore the consultant's observation that during this crucible, the individual is beginning to personalize their trading strategy and style.
Okay.
I want to push back on why this is framed as a mandatory step for progression.
Sure, let's hear it.
If an individual realizes they are in a drawdown
Yeah.
and they recognize they have deviated from their original plan, why can't they simply recommit to the directed knowledge from stage one?
Like just follow the rules better.
Exactly. If they bought a mathematically sound strategy from an expert, why must they personalize it? Why not just force themselves to execute the borrowed rules more strictly?
It's a logical question, but the barrier there is the nature of conviction. When you are executing a borrowed strategy, your belief in its efficacy is entirely dependent on its recent performance.
Because it's not yours.
Exactly. You trust the guru's rules as long as they are generating profits, but every mathematical edge in the market experiences periods of underperformance.
Even the best strategies have losing streaks.
Right. So when that borrowed strategy enters a severe, statistically normal drawdown, your brain will reject it. The cognitive dissonance becomes too great. You will assume the strategy is broken or that the market has fundamentally changed, and you will abandon it precisely at the wrong moment.
Because you don't possess an intimate understanding of why the strategy works, you can't trust it when it fails.
You cannot borrow conviction. It must be internally generated.
I love that. You cannot borrow conviction.
It's the truth. To survive the inevitable drawdowns, an individual must possess an unshakable, empirically verified belief that their edge will manifest over a large sample size of occurrences.
Right.
And the only way to forge that level of conviction is to dismantle the borrowed strategy, understand its core principles, and rebuild it in a way that aligns with your own logic. You have to mold the strategy until it makes intrinsic sense to your brain.
So you have to own it.
Yes. Only when the strategy becomes truly yours will you possess the psychological fortitude to execute it during a losing streak.
It sounds like personalizing the strategy is also about aligning it with your own psychological pain tolerance.
That is the core mechanism right there. If a directed strategy dictates risking 3% of your capital per trade, but your personal risk tolerance causes you to panic and lose emotional control when your account drops by 3%.
Then that strategy is completely useless to you.
Exactly. Even if it possesses a positive mathematical expectancy, your behavioral errors, driven by fear, they will bankrupt you. Personalization requires aligning the mathematical edge with your specific threshold for psychological discomfort.
And navigating that alignment, surviving the ego destruction of the drawdown, abandoning the reliance on external rules, and forging a highly personalized operational framework. That is what finally pushes an individual out of the turbulent transition phase.
Right, they finally cross the threshold.
They cross from stage 2 into stage 3. They shift from the verb of becoming to the noun of being.
Yes, being a trader.
The text titles this final stage simply, trader. And the consultant defines this state with some incredibly dense, powerful criteria.
Let's hear the first one.
The very first point under this category states that the trader has the skill and ability to develop and execute strategy in line with own abilities, skill, and strengths, as well as preferred risk, decision-making, information processing, and behavioral styles.
That single sentence right there dismantles the prevailing myth of the financial markets.
How so?
Well, the beginner operates under the illusion that there is an objectively perfect, universal strategy waiting to be discovered.
The Holy Grail.
Exactly, the Holy Grail. The master, however, understands that the strategy is entirely secondary to the individual executing it. The phrase information processing and behavioral styles is the key to this entire framework.
It's all about the individual.
Yes. The consultant recognizes that mastery requires absolute congruence between the individual's neurological wiring and their market approach.
Break down how different information processing styles dictate strategy. Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, let's examine the cognitive profile of someone who possesses rapid intuitive processing capabilities.
Okay, a fast thinker.
Right. This is an individual who can absorb a chaotic, fast-moving stream of data, immediately recognize micro patterns, make a split-second probabilistic decision, and instantly discard the outcome to prepare for the next data point.
Sounds exhausting, but some people are wired that way.
They are. They possess a high tolerance for continuous rapid-fire cognitive switching. For that specific neurological profile, a high-frequency, short-term trading strategy might be the optimal path to mastery.
They actually thrive in the noise.
Yes, exactly. But if you take a different cognitive profile, someone who is naturally highly analytical, deliberate, and methodical.
Like a deep thinker.
Right. If you force that deeply analytical, slow processing individual into a high-frequency trading environment, they will experience massive cognitive overload.
They just freeze.
Their brain will short-circuit. Because they require time to weigh variables, analyze historical context, and build a comprehensive thesis, they cannot make split-second decisions without experiencing severe anxiety.
So what do they do?
For that profile, mastery might involve a macroeconomic long-term positional strategy where they make, maybe a handful of deeply researched decisions per year.
So the mechanics of placing the trade are identical, but the psychological environments are entirely contradictory.
Precisely. The Stage 3 trader has completed the arduous introspective work required to identify their inherent cognitive strengths and weaknesses. They no longer try to force themselves into a methodology that contradicts their nature.
They've stopped fighting themselves.
Right. They have engineered a bespoke operational framework that maximizes their natural processing style while implementing strict rules to guardrail their known behavioral flaws.
And this congruence allows them to achieve the next bullet point in the consultant's text. Extensive levels of unconscious competence.
This is the culmination of the cognitive offloading that began in Stage 2.
Right, moving it to the background.
Yes, the conscious mind is now entirely liberated from the mechanics of execution. The analysis of risk, the identification of the setup, the entry, the position sizing, the exit parameters, it all just flows automatically.
The prefrontal cortex isn't burdened with calculating the details anymore.
Exactly. It is free to maintain a macro-level objective awareness of the whole environment.
It's the state of flow. I think about a master jazz musician improvising a complex solo.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Right. A beginner musician has to consciously calculate every single movement. They're thinking, the progression is moving to a G major, so I need to place my index finger here, my ring finger there.
And while they're thinking, they miss the beat.
Exactly. The conscious thought interrupts the music. But the master musician, they don't think about the fretboard or the keys. The instrument has just become an unconscious extension of their nervous system.
They're just playing.
Yeah, they simply hear the music in their mind and their hands execute it in real time.
And that flow state enables the next characteristic the text identifies, the ability to be flexible and adaptable to changing market and personal circumstances.
Because they're not locked into a script?
Right. The beginner, who is relying on directed knowledge, is extremely rigid. They have memorized a specific routine. If the market environment deviates from that routine even slightly, they are paralyzed.
But the masters.
The master, operating with unconscious competence, is fluid. They understand the deep underlying principles of price action and liquidity. So when the market regime inevitably changes, like when a period of low volatility suddenly erupts into high volatility, they don't freeze.
They just adapt.
They intuitively adjust their personalized framework to accommodate the new reality, just like your master jazz musician seamlessly adjusts their solo when the drummer suddenly changes the tempo.
I love that. They don't break because they are no longer rigid. And the text uses a very evocative word to describe this level of experience. It says the true trader is experienced, weathered in the markets.
Yes, weathered.
I want to linger on that word for a second. Weathered. It implies survival through intense, varied conditions over a long duration.
It is a very deliberate and profound choice of terminology. Think about it. A structure that is weathered has been subjected to extreme elemental forces.
Right.
It has endured the blistering heat, the freezing cold, and the violent storms, and it remains standing. The weak, superfluous parts have been stripped away, leaving only the resilient core.
So what does a weathered state look like in the context of the markets? I mean, we talk about market environments, but what does the individual actually have to survive to become weathered?
Well, first, they have to survive the structural cycles of the market itself. The market breeds in cycles of volatility, expansion, and contraction.
Boom and bust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A weathered trader has operated through euphoric bull markets where liquidity is abundant and every decision just seems brilliant.
And everyone feels like a genius.
Right. But crucially, they've also survived brutal bear markets, liquidity crunches, and systemic panics where correlated assets crash simultaneously and the whole financial system feels unstable.
They've seen the dark days.
They have. But more importantly than the external weather, they have survived their own internal weather.
Oh, wow. Explain that.
They have navigated the euphoria of massive gains without succumbing to reckless arrogance. They have endured the crushing despair of severe drawdowns without abandoning their methodology.
That they were emotionally balanced.
Yes. They have developed a callus over their emotional responses. They aren't cynical, but they are detached. They know that no single market regime lasts forever, and they understand that their primary objective is simply to survive to trade the next cycle.
And that weathered detachment leads directly to the consultant's observation that the stage 3 trader fully understands the importance of psychology in achieving consistent trading performance.
Right. In stage 2, they were just developing an awareness of it.
Now, it is the foundational bedrock of their existence.
They recognize that technical analysis or macroeconomic modeling is entirely subordinate to emotional regulation.
Because if you lose your cool, the model doesn't matter.
Exactly. The most sophisticated analytical model in the world is rendered completely useless if the individual executing it succumbs to fear during a drawdown or greed during a rally. The master views the management of their own cognitive state as their primary profession.
Managing themselves is the real job.
Yes, the market analysis is secondary.
Okay, but I need to deeply challenge this next point because this specific line in the consultant's notes seems to completely contradict the fundamental reality of the profession.
Let's hear it.
The text states that the stage 3 trader is less focused on P&L and more focused on execution and mastering their craft.
Yes, the P&L paradox.
Wait, P&L, profit and loss. This is a framework analyzing professional proprietary and bank traders. Their entire existence, their compensation, their continued employment is predicated entirely on generating profit.
That is true.
The singular metric of success in the financial markets is the P&L. So how can the ultimate master of this profession be less focused on the very metric that defines their success? It doesn't make sense.
It presents a profound paradox, I'll give you that. But it is actually the cognitive secret to high performance in any outcome-driven environment.
Oh.
We have to examine the psychological mechanism of outcome bias. If an individual's primary cognitive focus is fixated on the P&L, the scoreboard, they are focusing on a lagging indicator over which they have zero direct control.
Because you can't control what the market does after you enter a position.
Precisely. You can only control your entry, your risk management, and your exit parameters. If your psychological state is tethered to the fluctuating P&L, you invite immense emotional turbulence.
Because the numbers are constantly jumping around.
Right. When a trade goes immediately into profit, The brain experiences euphoria, leading to overconfidence and the potential to ignore your exit rules just out of pure greed.
You want more.
Yeah. And when a trade goes into a loss, the brain experiences fear, leading to paralysis or the urge to prematurely close a mathematically sound position just to stop the emotional pain.
So obsessing over the outcome actually degrades the decision-making process required to achieve that outcome.
Exactly. The master implements a massive cognitive behavioral shift. They systematically decouple their self-worth and their focus from the immediate financial result of any single trade.
They separate themselves from the money.
They have to. They understand that individual outcomes are heavily influenced by short-term randomness. Therefore, judging their performance based on the P&L of a single trade is intellectually dishonest.
So what do they focus on instead?
They shift their entire focus to the leading indicator, their execution.
Do I follow the rules?
Yes. Did I follow my personalized rules? Did I wait for the exact parameters of my edge to materialize? Did I size the position correctly according to my risk tolerance? Did I manage my emotional state?
And the answer to all of those questions is yes. Then the trade was a success, regardless of whether it actually made or lost money.
That is the mastery of the craft. They judge themselves strictly on the flawlessness of their execution. They possess the weathered conviction to know that if they execute their personalized edge perfectly over a statistically significant sample size of hundreds of trades, the consistent P&L is the inevitable mathematical byproduct.
It's the difference between trying to force the golf ball into the hole and simply focusing entirely on perfecting the mechanics of the golf swing.
Beautifully said.
The master trusts the swing. And the text notes that for this stage 3 trader, continual improvement is still a focus. They don't arrive at mastery and just stop working.
No, the work never stops.
They are endlessly refining the execution, forever analyzing their own cognitive processes, relentlessly focused on the craft.
And that concept of unending refinement transitions perfectly into the final section of the consultant's notes.
Yes, the continuum.
Right. Throughout this deep dive, we've discussed this framework as 3 distinct sequential boxes: learning, becoming, and being. But at the very end of the document, the author presents a diagram that reveals the true nature of this evolution.
It's not just boxes.
It isn't a set of isolated boxes, it is a fluid continuum. The diagram shows a single line with 4 markers: beginner, novice, competent, and expert.
And the introduction of this continuum is vital because it shatters the illusion of permanence.
Yes, mastery is not a destination where you permanently reside.
The 3 stages map pretty seamlessly onto this continuum. The learning phase corresponds to the transition from beginner to novice, characterized by conscious execution and directed knowledge.
Right.
The becoming crucible is that volatile territory between novice and competent, where drawdowns force the personalization of strategy.
The painful part.
Yes. And being a trader represents the arrival at the competent to expert spectrum, defined by unconscious competence and execution focus.
But the word continuum implies movement in both directions.
Right. If someone has achieved the status of an expert, a true stage 3 trader, how could they possibly slide backward?
They slide backward when the fundamental architecture of the environment shifts.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, let's assume an expert has spent a decade building massive unconscious competence in a market environment characterized by 0% interest rates and quantitative easing.
Free money, basically.
Right. Their personalized strategy is perfectly calibrated to that specific paradigm. But then the macroeconomic reality fractures. Central banks rapidly raise interest rates to levels not seen in 40 years.
The whole game changes.
Exactly. The liquidity dynamics fundamentally alter. Asset correlations break down. Suddenly, the expert's deeply ingrained personalized edge stops producing positive expectancy.
So the environment changed the rules of the game while they were playing it. Did they revert back to being a naive beginner?
Not exactly. They do not lose their weathered psychological resilience or their deep self-awareness, but they do experience a temporary regression on the continuum of mechanical competence regarding that new environment.
Because their automatic habits don't work anymore.
Right. The automatic unconscious execution is suddenly failing, so they have to actively re-engage their prefrontal cortex. They must slide back toward conscious execution to analyze the new variables, dismantle their strategy, and recalibrate their parameters to fit the new paradigm.
Wow, so they have to start over structurally.
Structurally, yes. But the distinction is that a true expert recognizes this regression immediately. They don't stubbornly fight the new reality. They engage in that continual improvement the text highlighted, actively and consciously working to rebuild their strategy until they can achieve unconscious competence in the new regime.
Which makes the final two sentences of this text incredibly sharp and, frankly, a bit confrontational.
Well, they are very direct.
Yeah. The consultant turns directly to the reader and poses two questions. Where would you place yourself on this continuum? What is the evidence for that?
And that second question is one of the most effective cognitive safeguards against ego-driven delusion I've ever encountered.
What is the evidence?
Yes. We discussed the trap of stage 1. The beginner who experiences a few random wins and becomes prone to overconfidence. That beginner looks at this continuum, feels a surge of dopamine from their recent profits, and proudly self-identifies as an expert.
But the consultant doesn't ask how you feel. They demand objective evidence.
The demand for evidence strips away all the psychological defense mechanisms we utilize to protect our self-image. You may deeply desire the identity of an expert, but what is the empirical proof?
Right.
Can you demonstrate extensive levels of unconscious competence? Have you navigated severe, prolonged drawdowns without suffering catastrophic psychological degradation or abandoning your methodology?
Are you actually weathered?
Exactly. Can you articulate how your bespoke operational framework perfectly aligns with your specific cognitive processing speed and risk tolerance? Do you possess the weather detachment required to evaluate your performance solely on the precision of your execution, entirely divorced from the immediate financial outcome?
Because if your only evidence of expertise is that you successfully followed a guru's rule last week and the market happened to reward you with a profit, well, the reality is stark. You are not an expert.
Not at all.
You are a beginner who benefited from a favorable sequence of variance.
And confronting that lack of evidence is deeply uncomfortable. It induces massive cognitive dissonance. But accepting the reality of your current placement on the continuum is the absolute mandatory prerequisite for initiating genuine progression.
You have to know where you are.
You cannot navigate toward mastery if you are lying to yourself about your starting coordinates.
So, what does this all mean? We've traced the entire arc of the consultant's framework today. We started at the starting line, examining the heavy, conscious execution of the beginner who desperately clings to directed knowledge, seeking certainty in an uncertain environment.
Right.
We waded through the brutal crucible of the novice phase, analyzing how drawdowns systematically attack the ego, forcing the individual to abandon borrowed rules and forge a resilient, deeply personalized methodology.
Painful transformation.
And finally, we explore the profound cognitive state of the true expert. The weathered individual operating with unconscious competence, perfectly aligned with their own psychology, relentlessly focused on the execution of the craft rather than the immediate reward.
And the overarching insight here is that the pursuit of mastery, whether in the financial markets or any complex endeavor, is ultimately a journey of profound psychological self-discovery.
It really is an internal journey.
Yes. The discipline eventually ceases to be external. It stops being a puzzle to be solved and transforms into a mirror that relentlessly reflects your inherent cognitive biases, your emotional fragilities, and your true capacity for resilience.
It is the arduous journey from learning the mechanics of a verb to earning the identity of a noun.
Brilliantly put.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought directly inspired by the text's most paradoxical revelation. The consultant established that tree experts reach the pinnacle of their profession, specifically by becoming less focused on the ultimate metric of success, the P&L, and entirely consumed by the flawless execution of their process.
Focusing on the swing, not the scoreboard.
Exactly. Consider the trajectory of your own life, your career, or the specific discipline you are striving to master. Are you unintentionally stunting your own evolution because you are obsessively fixated on the P&L of your daily existence?
That's a powerful question.
Are you so captivated by the lagging indicators, the grades, the salary bumps, the external validation, the immediate outcomes that you have neglected the rigorous, conscious refinement of your daily execution? True mastery is rarely achieved by anxiously staring at the scoreboard. It is forged by looking inward, enduring the psychological weather, and quietly, relentlessly perfecting the craft. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are exploring a set of source notes that, honestly, they fundamentally challenge how we think about